The snow fell the way old stories do, slow and thick, covering everything once loud or sharp. It muffled the world until even the trees seemed hesitant to breathe. In that silence, a woman sat by her hearth, sewing a patch onto a worn coat that didn't belong to anyone anymore. Her hands were red from a cold, stiff with quiet ache, but she worked without complaint. The fire snapped. Outside, the wind moved like a ghost along the edge of the ridgeline. Her cabin leaned into the pines as if hiding, just like her. Built by her husband's hands when he still had strengthened them, it now bore the loneliness he left behind. He died 2 winters back, lungs filling too fast with blood to call for help. The town folk didn't come then either. Not for the funeral. Not for the firewood she couldn't chop. Not when her ankle broke in 3 places hauling in water from the frozen creek. They'd stopped seeing her as one of them long before that. The limp only made their gossip louder. That morning, like every other, she had fed the hens, gathered what few eggs they gave, and set a kettle to boil. The day was meant to pass unnoticed, until a strange cry tore through the trees. Not the cry of wolf or coyote, nor the hungry screech of an eagle. This was human, ragged, close. She stood still. The steam from her kettle wove past her face as her breath fogged the window. Nothing moved but the snowfall. She listened with the stillness of prey. Then it came again, a guttural, strangled sound, followed by a low growl that vibrated through the frozen ground. She reached for the rifle. Stepping outside, she was met with a sharp slap of wind and the scent of blood. Pine needles, brittle with frost, crunched beneath her boots as she followed the noise down the slope toward the stand of spruce. And there it was, a bear, massive and ragged with winter hunger, its muzzle stained red. Beneath it, a man thrashed weakly, arm lifted in vain defense. His face was marked with paint, but fading, smeared now with blood and melting snow. Apache, she thought. The word rose like a half-forgotten hymn. She raised her rifle. The bear turned its head, locking eyes with her, and in that moment, she knew the shot wouldn't be clean. She fired anyway. The bullet tore through the trees, cracking wide and loud. It struck the bear's shoulder, but barely a graze. The beast reared, howling in rage, turning toward her. Her second shot missed. In that terrible second of stillness before it charged, she did not pray. She simply grabbed the kettle, still hot from a hearth, and flung it with all the strength left in her. The boiling water caught the bear across its face, steam rising with the roar of its pain. It stumbled, growled, then turned and vanished into the trees, crashing through the undergrowth like thunder on 4 legs. Silence returned in pieces, broken only by the shallow gasps of the wounded man. She approached him slowly, rifle still in hand. He was young, barely a man, yet already scarred deep along the collarbone. One leg twisted wrong. Blood seeped through a gash along his ribs. His eyes fluttered open, black as midnight and full of shame. He did not speak, nor did she. She looked at him, at the way his fingers curled in pain, how his breath came hard but steady. She remembered how it felt to be on the ground like that, begging the sky for help while folks passed by with baskets full of bread and sermons. She could leave him. She could walk back into her cabin and close the door. No one would ask. No one would know. They would nod later if they found his body and say it was nature's justice. They'd call her wise, call her careful, maybe even brave. But then she saw his hand twitch, trying to hold pressure against his side. Trying even now. "I reckon I owe no man nothing," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "But I won't be like them." She dropped the rifle into the snow and knelt beside him. The drag back to the cabin was slow and brutal. She tied a quilt around his chest to keep the bleeding down, then used the coat she'd been mending as a makeshift sling for his arm. Snow crept into her boots, her hem, her joints. Still she pulled. His breath was shallow, but he didn't pass out. Not fully. Inside, the fire had burned low. She stoked it back to life, threw in 2 more logs, then laid him on the bearskin near the hearth. He tried to rise, eyes wild with instinct, but the pain chained him down. "Stop that," she said softly. "I ain't gonna kill you." His eyes followed her as she moved, a can of herbs, a needle, boiled cloth. She cut away his shirt with slow, apologetic hands. The wounds were clean, but deep. Teeth marks at the shoulder, claw at the ribs, bruising everywhere. She stitched without ceremony. He made no sound, only looked away. He didn't ask her name, nor she his. There was a quiet understanding in that silence. Names could wait. Names were for people who expected to stay. When she finished, she covered him with her dead husband's quilt and sat back against the wall, her leg throbbing, fingers shaking only now that it was over. The storm rolled in proper by dusk. Wind screamed around the cabin like wolves denied meat. Still, he did not speak. But he watched her with strange eyes, not grateful, not pleading, simply watchful, as though she were more danger than the bear. She set stew to boil, and the scent of salt and bone filled the room. When it was ready, she poured 2 bowls. He didn't reach for his. She nudged it closer. "You need it," she said. He did not move. "Suit yourself." She ate her share, then left his by the fire. Sleep threatened to drag her down, but she resisted. She wouldn't sleep until he did. She watched the snow dance in the wind, listened to the creak of the roof beams. Somewhere in the trees, an owl cried. She leaned her head back. The pain in her ankle flared, a sharp reminder of how long it had been since anyone had stood at her door needing anything but rumors to spread. She didn't know if the man beside her was dangerous. She didn't know if the bear would return. But she knew this. She'd done something no one had done for her. Not once. Not ever. And maybe that would have to be enough. As her eyes drifted shut, she heard a sound, soft, rough, shaped like a single word. "Why?" She opened her eyes. He was staring at her, face pale, lashes rimmed with frost. "You're breathing, ain't you?" she answered, voice raw with fatigue. Seemed reason enough. He didn't speak again, but his fingers curled closer around the bowl. She turned back to the fire, let her head rest against the wall. In that final breath before sleep, she thought of the bear's roar, the moment the kettle flew, the heat rising in the snow. She smiled once, barely. The snow was still falling, covering the trail they had left. Out there, the world might still be cruel. But inside the cabin, 2 strangers sat, one healing, one remembering, and between them, a silence that held no judgment, only breath. And for the first time in years, she did not feel alone. The fire was a low whisper by the time she stirred again. The embers had dimmed, their glow caught in the hollows of the raider's cheekbones as he slept, or pretended to. She didn't ask which. The cabin still held the scent of boiled herbs and pine smoke, though the snow outside pressed heavier now, dimming the daylight into a silver hush. She reached for more wood, careful not to groan as her stiff leg caught beneath her weight. The pain was old, familiar. She could carry it as long as she needed to. Behind her, the man's eyes were open, black, sharp, and far too alert for someone barely alive the night before. His bowl was empty now. She hadn't seen him take the first bite, hadn't heard the spoon against the tin. But he'd eaten, and that meant something. "You're not Apache," he said, voice rough as gravel scraped by the wind. She didn't look at him, just stacked the wood, fed the flame, and answered, "Wasn't trying to be." He didn't reply. The silence settled between them again, not comfortable, not hostile. Just there, like a third soul in the room. The wind scratched against the shutters, dragging loose snow like claws across the wood. She turned to check the latch, then froze. There were shadows moving beyond the tree line, bigger than wind, too many for deer. She stepped closer to the window. Her breath fogged the pain, but she didn't need a clear view to know. They were there. Figures, mounted, still, unmoving as carved idols. Maybe a dozen. Maybe more. They made no sound, no movement toward the cabin. Just watched. Her hand dropped from the curtain. "How many?" she asked, though the tone in her voice suggested she already knew the answer. He sat up, grunting with effort. His left side was stiff, freshly stitched. He shifted until his back rested against the wall, and turned his head toward the window. "All of them," he said, "or enough to make no difference." She turned slowly to face him. "Your tribe." He nodded, then added, "They think you took me." "Took you." Her voice cracked dry with disbelief. "I dragged your hide out of the snow and kept you from being supper. That's not talking. That's mercy." His eyes didn't soften. "To them, I'm worth a ransom, or a blood debt." She moved to the table, poured water into a tin mug with slow hands. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not fear, not yet, but memory. "They think I'd ransom a man?" she asked, almost to herself. "They think I'd keep a wounded soul in my home, like some kind of—" She trailed off. "You saved me," he said, not unkindly. "They don't understand that." She sat down, the mug warm between her palms. "Neither do I." The silence stretched. Outside, the tribe didn't move. Inside, time seemed to slow, every breath caught on edge. He studied the room, noticing the simplicity of it, the wear in the fabric, the way things had been repaired too many times. "You live alone?" "I do." "Why?" That question, spoken without cruelty, landed like a stone dropped in deep water. She could have lied. She'd done it before. Told traveling preachers she liked the quiet, or that her man was just away on business, or that the town was too full of noise for her liking. But the moment between them didn't want to lie. "After my husband died," she said slowly, "the town turned cold. Not all at once. Just little things." She didn't look at him, but she saw him watching. "They said I was cursed. Said a woman who loses a man, that Young must have done something to deserve it. Then a rancher started telling folks I'd offered myself to him for a sack of flour." His eyes narrowed. "I hadn't," she added softly. "But it didn't matter. The town believed him. And even if they didn't, they liked having something to say. Something to whisper over church steps." He leaned his head back against the log wall. The flicker of firelight danced across his jawline. "I know that kind of exile," he said, more to himself than to her. "You were banished?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. "Then, I left when I wasn't supposed to. Took food from the storehouse when there was none left for me. I did it to live. That was enough. And yet they followed you." He smiled without mirth. "Not to bring me back. To see who else would dare take me in." The wind howled louder now. She rose and walked to the door, unlatched it, and stepped onto the porch. The snow was knee-deep. The sky above held no stars. Only the forest, still and dark, and the shapes of horses, unmoving, silent. She didn't speak to them. She just stood there, letting them see her. One hand on her hip, the other resting lightly on the rail. Not defiant, not submissive, just unafraid. After a long moment, she turned and went back inside. "They're watching," she said, brushing snow from her skirt. "They're waiting to see what you are," he answered. She paused at that. Not who, but what. He drank his water now, slow and careful. She took note of how his hands, though cracked and scarred, handled the cup with reverence, like someone raised to hold things that could be broken. "Do they think I'll harm you?" she asked. "No," he said. "They think you'll shame me." That struck deeper than she expected. "By showing you kindness?" "By reminding them I needed it." She sat again. Her leg ached fiercely now, but she ignored it. "Let them watch," she said at last. "Let them see a woman feed a stranger and not ask what tribe he came from. Let them wonder if grace still lives in these woods." For the first time, his face shifted. Not quite a smile, not fully trust, but something close. That night, she made stew again. He watched her work, not with suspicion, but curiosity. She caught him glancing at her limp when she stood too long on it. "You were injured?" he asked. "Slipped on ice haul and water," she said. "No one came when I screamed. I lay there near half the night. By the time I crawled back, the bone had set wrong." "Why didn't they help?" "Because I wasn't worth helping." He didn't answer, but she saw his jaw clench. When she handed him his bowl, their fingers brushed. Just a second, skin on skin. But something changed. He met her eyes, not to thank her, but to see her. "You don't fear them," he said. "I've lived through worse than being looked at," she replied. She went to the window once more. The figures were still there. But she noticed something. One of them was smaller. A child, maybe, sitting atop a paint horse, unmoving. "They brought their young," she whispered. "Means they weren't planning to kill me." "Means they came to learn," he said. She let that sit between them. When the fire burned low again, they laid down, she on the cot, he by the hearth. The snow hissed against the chimney. Neither of them spoke. But in the quiet, something less visible passed between them. Not trust. Not yet. But recognition. In the stillness, before sleep, she whispered just loud enough for him to hear. You ain't the only one who had to leave home to survive. His voice, quiet as drifting ash. Maybe that's why you found me. And with that, the fire sighed, and the snow kept falling, and the watchers in the woods did not leave. They were waiting. Just like her. The snow had softened by morning, but the cold had not. It held the land in a quiet grip, frosting the pines and tracing lace along the cabin windows. Smoke drifted from the chimney like a promise that someone inside still lived, still breathed, still dared to warm a fire in a world so ready to forget the lonely. She woke before light, as she always did, her limbs aching, her breath slow in the chilled air. The raider was already sitting up by the hearth, blanket drawn around his shoulders, his eyes on the door. He hadn't slept, or if he had, it was the kind that never goes deep enough to rest the soul. She didn't speak, just set the kettle on and stirred the embers back into a crackling flame. Their silence wasn't hostile now. It had settled into something else, a rhythm, like two wounded animals sharing a den, learning not to flinch at each other's presence. When the tea was poured, she handed him a cup. His hands didn't shake as much this time. The swelling along his side had gone down, but his wounds still tugged at him with every breath. She could see the weight in his posture, the way pride warred with pain. They're still out there, he said after a long sip, voice hushed, but certain. She nodded. I saw 'em shift at dawn. They move closer. They'll test you. Let them. He studied her face. You're not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. She stepped outside a little past sunup, the kettle in hand, steam trailing behind her like a banner of peace. The snow crunched beneath her boots, loud and final in the hush of the pine-ringed clearing. The tribe watched her from the tree-line, a curved line of horses and men, and one child, small and still, nestled beside a warrior whose eyes followed her every step. She didn't speak. Words were too easy to twist. Instead, she approached with careful dignity, stopping 10 paces from the nearest horse. Her hand lifted the kettle in offering, slow and deliberate. The other hand stayed empty, open at her side. No gun, no threat. One man dismounted, older than the rest. Weathered face, sharp jaw, long gray braid. A war chief, she guessed by the silence that fell around him as he moved. He approached alone. She set the kettle on a stump between them, then did something she hadn't planned. She knelt. Not in submission, but in understanding. She placed both hands on her knees and bowed her head, not low, but long enough to say, I mean no harm. The wind moved between them like a whisper. The chief bent slightly at the waist, the smallest gesture of respect, then reached for the kettle. He poured a measure into a leather-wrapped mug at his belt, sipped, and nodded once. He turned without a word and walked back toward the line. She did not watch him go. She stood slowly, brushed snow from her skirt, and walked back toward the cabin. Inside, the raider sat by the window, his jaw tight. You bowed to him. I bowed to peace, she said. There's a difference. He looked away. They'll leave now, he said, though it sounded more like a hope than a truth. They might, she agreed. But I wouldn't wager on it. It was late morning when the riders returned. Not to the cabin, but to the outer edge of her field, where the frost-covered barn leaned like a tired old man. She watched from the doorway as 3 dismounted. One of them held something wrapped in buckskin, a satchel. He placed it on the fence post and stepped back. She didn't need to ask. It was an offering, not payment, not threat, a gesture, equal to hers. She walked out, unwrapped the satchel. Inside, a bundle of herbs, a folded shirt finely made, and a necklace of bone and turquoise. They're watching how you carry weight, the raider said softly behind her. What you do when power sits on your doorstep. I reckon I just opened the door, she replied. They stood there a while, neither speaking. The sun rose high and cold, casting blue shadows on the snow. Then came the sound she didn't want to hear. Hooves. Not light like the Apache ponies. Heavy, sloppy. Men from town. 3 riders, jackets stiff, with dust and pride. At their center was the rancher, the one who once tried to ruin her name with whispers and lies. His voice was louder than it needed to be, always had been. "Well, now look at this," he drawled, dismounting with a smirk. "Heard you had yourself some company." The raider stepped back into the cabin's shadow. "What do you want?" she asked, voice flat. "Just checking in on a neighbor. Heard you dragged in a savage and lit a fire for him." He spat into the snow. "Guess being alone got to you." She said nothing. The other men chuckled. One of them nudged his horse forward, peering toward the cabin. "You know, folks might think you've changed sides," he said. "Might think you're not so loyal to white folks anymore." "I was never loyal to liars," she answered. That shut them up for a moment. "You got nerve, speaking like that with all of us here," the rancher said. "I've got nerve 'cause I've got nothing left for you to take." Behind her, the door creaked. The raider stepped out. Barefoot, shirtless, wounds visible. But upright. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The men stiffened. One reached slowly for his pistol. But the rancher put a hand out, stopping him. Because, in the trees behind the cabin, shapes began to move. 1, then 4, then a dozen. The tribe hadn't left. They'd circled back, silent as snowfall, and now they stood in full view, bows unstrung, but hands ready. The rancher laughed, though it rang thin. "Well, guess you've made new friends, haven't you?" The woman stepped forward, close enough for him to see the scar above her eyebrow, the one she got when he shoved her outside the saloon 2 years back for daring to speak up. "They were kinder to me than you ever were," she said. "And I don't think they mean to harm you, but I do believe they're waiting to see what you'll do next." The wind kicked up, scattering snow across the field. The rancher stepped back, lips tight. "Let's go," he snapped. The men turned. She didn't watch them ride off. Instead, she turned to the raider. "That was the last visit we'll get for a while. They'll talk. They always do. But now they've got nothing new to say." He looked past her to the tree-line. One of the younger warriors raised a hand. A child, maybe 12, small but proud. She lifted her chin in return. "What do they see when they look at you?" he asked. "I think," she said softly, "they see a woman who didn't flinch." Later, she found the necklace from the offering bundle. She didn't put it on, just held it in her palm for a long while, fingers brushing the smooth edge of each bead. "You're not afraid of being seen," the raider said again, almost to himself. "I've been invisible too long," she said. "Might as well let the world see me now, scars and all." The cabin was quiet again, but it felt different. Not just shelter, not just survival. It felt chosen, like something had shifted beneath the floorboards, like roots finding stronger ground. He watched her as she moved, not with suspicion, not even with thanks, but with a recognition that comes only when 2 people have seen each other completely, and neither turned away. As the fire warmed the room, he said, "You changed something today." She didn't answer at first, just added more wood to the fire and said, "So did you." And somewhere beyond the pines, the tribe lingered not out of doubt, but out of interest. Because what they saw wasn't just an outcast helping another. They saw something far rarer in that land of survival and suspicion. They saw a beginning. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth, heavy with thawing snow and something else beneath it, something faint and bitter. She woke to it before sunrise, her breath catching in her throat. The cabin was quiet but wrong, the kind of quiet that presses against the ribs, that doesn't belong. She pushed the blanket aside and reached for her boots, still cold from the night. The raider stirred by the hearth, already awake, gaze fixed on the window. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Smoke. Not from their chimney. He stood slowly, favoring his injured side, but moving with purpose now. He no longer looked like a man wounded. He looked like a man remembering what he used to be. She reached for her coat, pulled her rifle down from the wall. The silence outside shattered with a sharp crack, wood splitting. Then another. And then the faint, unmistakable sound of flame. She threw the door open. The barn was on fire. Not engulfed yet, but the lower walls already licked with red-orange tongues. Smoke poured upward in frantic spirals. Horses gone. Hay ablaze. The snow around it melted into black mud. She didn't move at first. Just stood there, mouth dry, heart a drum. And then came the second sound. A man's voice. Shouting. Slurred with drink. "Come on out, you Apache-loving whore." The raider stepped behind her, eyes narrowed. She could feel the tension ripple through him like heat before lightning. It was the rancher. Of course it was. His silhouette swayed near the edge of the firelight, pistol drawn, coat open to the cold like he didn't feel it. 2 others were with him, though one looked uncertain, glancing at the tree line. She stepped off the porch, slow and deliberate. "Put out," she said. "There's still time." "I didn't come to talk," the rancher spat. "You made me a laughingstock in town. You and that stray mutt you're keeping." "You did that yourself," she said, "long before he came." The rancher raised his pistol toward the cabin. "I came to end it. No more whispers. No more pitying looks." From the shadows, the raider stepped forward. The rancher froze. "You come here with fire and fear, and you still expect to be a man," the raider said, voice low. "You ain't got the right to speak." "Then shoot," the raider said, stepping closer. "But know this, your death will not come for me." The flames surged higher, casting long shadows. One of the rancher's men muttered something. The third turned his horse around and rode off into the woods without a word. The rancher took a stumbling step forward, pistol shaking. She stepped between him and the raider, lifting her rifle not to fire, but to hold. "Leave," she said. "You have a choice. For once in your damn life, take the one that doesn't end in blood." "You think you're above me now," he hissed. "You're still nothing. You're just a ruined woman in a house built by a dead man." She didn't flinch. "Maybe. But I didn't come here to kill anyone. I came here to live. And I'll keep doing that whether you're here or not." His eyes flicked to the raider behind her, then to the fire, then to the forest. Shapes were gathering, silent, watchful. The tribe had returned. Not to fight, not to intervene, to bear witness. The rancher saw them. All at once, the bravado cracked. His hand wavered. She lowered her rifle and stepped forward, slow. "You wanted someone to blame. You picked me. You did it when my man died. You did it when I wouldn't crawl. And you'll keep doing it unless you walk away now." He stared at her, eyes bloodshot, mouth working. And then, with a guttural growl, he turned and fired into the air, one wild, useless shot, before stumbling into the woods. The remaining man hesitated, then followed. She turned back toward the barn. The flames were climbing toward the loft. The raider was already moving. He grabbed a water barrel, half frozen, and started dousing the flames. She followed, using a wet sack to beat at the base. Smoke clawed at their lungs. Heat seared their cheeks. But they didn't stop. Buckets appeared. Hands. Quiet feet. The tribe had stepped in. Not a word spoken. Together, they killed the fire. It took an hour. By the end, the barn was half charred, but the house untouched. The flames didn't win. Not entirely. She sat on the porch when it was over, mud on her dress, soot on her arms. The raider stood near the steps, breath heavy, body worn. The war chief approached. The same man from the day before. He did not speak. He simply removed a strip of cloth from his coat, a band of woven color, dyed in red and deep green. He tied it around the post beside her, not as a claim, but as a symbol. Safe. She looked up at him, eyes rimmed with smoke tears. He nodded once, then turned away. The others followed. The child looked back over his shoulder, face unreadable, before vanishing into the trees. The raider remained. She didn't ask why. He sat beside her, silent. The sky above was starting to clear, stars fighting through the clouds. The scent of burnt timber clung to everything. "Why didn't you leave with them?" she asked. "I've been running too long," he said. "And I think I found what I wasn't looking for." She smiled faintly, the expression cracked but true. "They'll come back," she said. "The town. The judgment." "Let them," he replied. "We've already survived worse." She looked down at her hands, rough, scarred, but steady. I never thought I'd have someone beside me at the end of a day like this." "You didn't," he said. "You had someone beside you at the start of it." The wind softened. The forest quieted. The land, for once, felt like could breathe again. He rose and walked to the edge of the clearing. She watched him move, still limping slightly, but no longer broken. He paused there, staring up at the night sky, then turned back toward her. "There's a word in my tongue," he said, "for a woman who gives without taking, who guards without being asked. It means heart that does not close." She met his eyes. "And what do they call the man who sees that kind of heart?" He thought a moment. "Lucky." She laughed. It was low and warm and surprised her. He returned to the porch, sat again. The stars thickened above them. Neither spoke. There was nothing more to say, but everything still to become. And in the hush that followed, the wind carried only one truth. They had not found love yet, but they had found the place where love might begin. And sometimes, in a land of blood and fire, that was the greater miracle. Out here, what survives isn't always the strongest. It's the soul that stays kind, the one that bends but does not break, the hand that helps a stranger even when no one's looking. In the end, we ain't remembered by what we build or burn. We're remembered by who we stood beside when the smoke cleared. So if you find someone who walks into your fire without a skin, why, keep him. That's home. That's hope.